Welcome to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where owners of privately held middle market companies talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses successfully. Learn how to maximize and monetize your business on your own terms. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Susan Carney, your host for the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where middle market owners and CEOs talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses. This episode today is brought to you by Newport LLC, a cadre of founders, business owners, and seasoned C-suite executives who help owners of privately held companies build more valuable businesses and exit them on their own terms. For example, we help the owner of a professional services company polish the business up and then exit at a 13x EBITDA multiple. Changed his life and the lives of his team. It was a great experience. We're proud to be among the select list of Inc. magazine power partners this year, and you can learn more about us at newportllc.com. But enough about that. Today, I'm talking with Catherine Connelly. Catherine's an entrepreneur, an author, and speaker. She co-founded the social network myYearbook at the age of 15 and grew it into the Meet Group, a NASDAQ-listed company reaching millions of users and leading to a $500 million acquisition. Catherine's the author also of Designing Success and writes the newsletter Grow Up Startup, where she reflects on lessons from her journey that she's going to explain to us today. So good morning. Welcome, Catherine.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Catherine, what I want to do today is I want to start by talking a little bit about your professional journey. Mm-hmm. I don't know many teenagers who start a company that turns into a powerhouse like you did at the age of 15 and are successful at it. So tell me how you came to start that company, myYearbook, at that tender age.
So I answer that question. Honestly, I think I have to, rewind it even a little bit further back to say I had such an incredibly lucky experience to be exposed to entrepreneurship very young. So my oldest brother, Jeff, he's 11 years older than me. And he started his first company while also attending college. So he started, dorm room startup. And, I was 7 when he was starting that company. So I grew up seeing that path. And my parents used to send my other brother, Dave, and I out to visit him in the summers. They were looking in Palm Springs, California. So, you got the beautiful pool and everything's all nice. And when we were tweens, 11 and 12, Jeff's in his office, he's working, and we can tell it's stressful. We can tell it's a lot of work, but there's also fun. There's a foosball table, way better than bring your parents to work day. It was fun. Yeah. And he would put us to work. So we would be visiting him and he'd have us, stuff packets or whatever needed to be done. And he'd pay us in toys and DVDs. And so we had that initial exposure to entrepreneurship, which made it so that we always wanted to be entrepreneurs, Dave and I. And so when we were new in our high school and we're having trouble making new friends, we're like, well, can't we build something that would make this easier? And so one day, we're just flipping through a normal high school yearbook. And that's where the idea for myYearbook came from. And it was one of those things where we knew it was something we could do because we had seen it done before. We had watched as Jeff started his first company. So we knew, okay, this is something that when you have an idea, you can pursue it. You can start building it. And I think that was why, we started at 15 and 16, just because why not? The opportunity, what was the opportunity cost? We would otherwise get a job, bagging groceries at ShopRite or, doing something similar to that. So why not try for this? And we figured, even if it fails, it's going to be a pretty good college admissions essay. So there's really no downsides. Now, of course, there was the naivety of I don't think, when we were starting, we could realize even what 1 million users looks like. And we ended up hitting that within the first year. So it was very much happened fast. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, the stakes were really low before. Now they're high. now we need this thing to succeed.
Yeah. And so you started the business with your brother. Tell us about that, because a lot of folks who listen to this podcast, their husbands and wives, their siblings, their cousins, they're working with their family. And that can be both a wonderful thing and an awful thing. Tell me about how it worked for you and your brother.
So it worked for us. So the initial idea I had with Dave, and then Jeff actually left the company that he had sold his first company to and joined us early on. So it was the three of us, and his girlfriend at the time, now wife, was also, also joined us. And so it was, I don't know. I love working with my brothers. And I think so much of having a co-founder is you need to trust them. Mm-hmm. And you need to believe that not only, you might disagree on something related to the business itself. You're going to have difference of opinion. That's always going to happen. Yep. But what I think was good about starting a company with siblings is you already know how to work out your differences in opinion because you've been doing that your whole life. You've always had differences in opinions playing together. You had to figure it out. And so you kind of take that into the startup ecosystem because you're like, okay, well, we disagree on this, but we still trust each other. We still trust each other that we know that their other person, even when we disagree, we know that they're still doing the best for the company, doing the best that they see for us. And, we would find ways to work out those disagreements. And I think that is just an important skill with no matter if you're related to your co-founder or not, knowing how you're going to work out those clashes as they come up, because there always are going to come up. And so I was incredibly lucky that, of course, my brothers and I get along. We have similar senses of humor. That makes it a lot of fun, especially during the sleepless nights as we're building this thing. And it just made it so much more enjoyable to be working on it with people I enjoy. But with that said, I think there was some backlash to our surrounding family members that maybe didn't always want to talk about my yearbook or Meet Me or the Meet Group because we change our names every 5 years. I think I remember at my, it was right before our first exit. So we'll get into it, but it was $100 million deal but that's what brought us public. And we were talking about it constantly. And I remember it was my niece's birthday party and her older sister, so the 4-year-old said, she's like, could you stop talking about the deal? And it was just, it was adorable. And also we're like, noted, we will table this for now. And so I think that there is still the drawback of when you are starting something with someone, whether it be a spouse, whether it be a sibling, it does bleed into basically all of your interactions. And so you have to be a bit more proactive about setting those boundaries and say, okay, maybe my niece's birthday party is not the time to talk about this. Right. And realizing, okay, let's take a break from work. And I think that it is important to have that space away from what you're building because you can come back with more clarity. But when you're building with people that you're very, very close to in all of your connections, you have to find ways to create that space.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sometimes hard to put work in the back of the closet rather than have it in the middle of the dining room table.
Right. Exactly. Because it's in your head and it's always going to be in your head. And then you have to purposely put those blinders in.
Yeah. So you learned that at a young age. Tell me a little bit about the arc of that business and the lessons that you learned as you went through that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So starting it was, already a big lesson as we were building it was how do we, MySpace was already out. MySpace launched in 2004. So it was already out and big. And so we wanted to make sure that, we're an early social network. We want to be different than MySpace. And we had to figure out, okay, how do we separate ourselves from MySpace? How do we differentiate? Also from Facebook, which for the most part, high schoolers didn't really know about because it was only in colleges. But we knew, eventually it was going to come in. And early on, the concept of myYearbook was basically Facebook for high school. And we thought, okay, we're going to grow the same way Facebook did, do it school to school. And so that worked really well in our school. So we launched, we got our first members to join by wearing fun t-shirts to school every day. They said things like answering the questions that matter most. Who are your friends' friends? And are they hot? Things that attract high schoolers. And we were able to get 400 people to sign up in the first week. So we knew we had something. And in those very early days, we started learning, this is fantastic. We're in the proving grounds of our market. And of course, we weren't using words like that because we were 15 and 16. But right. We were getting feedback from our friends as we're on the track, in the high school cafeteria, people are coming up, they're saying, I like this feature stinks. How can you change this? And Dave and I would come home from school, we'd iterate, we'd say, okay, let's change this up. Let's get it live in a different way. And so the product already was morphing. And we realized that even though when we started, and we outsourced the original code to developers in Mumbai. So we were sending them hundreds of pages of specification sheets and pen on paper wireframes. They detailed every aspect of the site and how it would operate. And then you launch and you see how things actually do, and you're like, oh, this 100 pages didn't have to be done. It wasn't really so much of an MVP as let's see what sticks, let's see what works. A lot of it was like relatively simple features that ended up not being used, like a blog and stuff, because blogging was already accounted for. We didn't really need that feature. But we started learning basically, okay, this is how you take user feedback, because user feedback doesn't usually come in the sense of like build this feature. It comes in the form of this feature stinks. How can you, and then it's up to you as the founder to figure out, okay, how do we make it not stink? And one of the first examples of that was we had this early feature called superlatives, again, coming off the yearbook theme. Now in our high school, Dave and I were winning every single superlative because people were just voting for the founders. And so I was winning prettiest eyes, best butt. There's all sorts of the categories were, of course, were more fun than your typical high school yearbook. And the feedback on that was somewhat a little bit mean, because there's some other girls in my class that were saying, oh, Catherine couldn't possibly be winning that. I mean, she's not, good looking enough, or whatever. And then saying that, okay, we're fixing the results, but we weren't. People were voting for us because you're just voting for the founders. That's the thing. But we did realize, okay, these results are very stale, and that does make it not fun. So setting aside the kind of mean things they were saying, I was like, okay, what if it's a one-on-one contest? And that way and so we renamed it Battles, and it became one of our biggest features. And even 20 years later, there's still with the current live streaming feature that's big on the apps. Now I exited the company, so I'm not there anymore, but it was one of the things that we launched while I was there. Is Battles is still alive in some form, and it's because we found a way to make it competitive, but in a fun way. That's in a good way. So if you're having a funniest picture battle, you're not up against everyone in your whole school or your whole network, and you see that. Yeah. The other main thing that we learned was that we were not going to grow school by school. So our entire first concept of how the company was going to grow was next. We did well in our school. We couldn't figure out how to launch in other schools. And we turned to the data and saw, what? It doesn't actually matter how big your school network is. It just matters how many people you have near you. And that's how the company morphed within the first few months to be about meeting people nearby, not just about meeting people in your school. And that's what ushered in our growth, so that then we could expand. It's like, okay, well, if we don't have to be confined to a school, then what can we do? And we ended up creating a feature that became very viral. It was a viral quiz feature. People would share their quiz results on their AIM profiles, Myspace profiles. We were taking advantage of what was already viral, was already popular. And that's what led us to getting our first 1 million users in the first year.
Wow, that's huge. And I'm thinking back on my own experience and others of getting that MVP in market and trying desperately to get feedback. And for you folks, you had a bit of luck, skill as well, of course, obviously, but that you swam every day in the ocean with the fish you wanted to catch.
100%. That was our feedback. And it's so important. And it became something that we did just as a company too, because, after high school, we're no longer surrounded by our users. And eventually we became 18 and up. We kind of aged up as Dave and I aged up. And we were always needing that feedback. So we would just make sure we built in ways. So we would have user surveys and do market research, talk to users. Because if you're not talking to whoever your customer is, then you're never going to understand what they need to be built. Because we became more of like a dating app. And for I was 23 when I met my husband. So for the bulk of the company, was not needing a dating app. And so the only reason I would know what a dating app to be successful needs is because one, I was still a member of hundreds of them. And then also, I'm talking to members. I'm seeing like, okay, what's working for you here? What's not working for you? And of course, doing, more quantifiable surveys and things. But it's so important. Just always have your ear to the customer.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Being outside in is the way I think of that instead of inside out. Right.
Yeah.
Not making the decisions in the conference room. That's terrific. So tell me a little bit about then how you think about scaling that company or any company, because you did age out of high school and the startup phase, which then leads to that scaling, that high growth phase. And so how did you guys go about that?
So after we got our first 1 million members, it was really at that point, at that scale, what we needed to build. That's when we started pursuing venture capital. Mm-hmm. And we raised a $4.1 million round in November of 2006. So it was like shortly after we opened our first office. So we opened our first office in a small town of New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is not your typical startup environment. It's like antiquing, and it's this beautiful town on the Delaware River. But we liked it because we figured anyone that's commuting to New York could also commute to New Hope, or from Philadelphia. It's well located, and it's a nice place to be for community. But as we thought about scaling it, we realized that New Hope actually became important to our culture in different ways because we weren't located in San Francisco or New York. We were able to be really focus on what made us special, as we weren't being pulled by whatever the Silicon Valley fad was. We can control how much Silicon Valley basically we got. And we would be out there frequently. We would keep up our relationships with companies out west. But it's not the same of being constantly there and feeling like, oh, I need to chase this next shiny thing. We could focus on building what we wanted to be, because in New Hope, we weren't constantly pulled in different directions. It, I think, allowed us to focus a lot better than if we were located in a major city or something like that early on. And so as we were doing that initial scale, it's like, okay, how do we be the best place to meet new people? We were able to basically hone in on what that means too, because we would break out, I think anytime when you have a North Star, you need to break down what that means into measurable targets. Otherwise, it's just, a platitude. Like, what are you going to do with that? And so for us, being the best place to meet new people meant that we needed daily active users, or DAU, and we needed those people to come back. So we needed to focus on retention. And so every feature we would launch, every product would be focused on how do we improve those two metrics? And if it wasn't going to improve those metrics, then, it was something that, got pushed to the backlog. But by doing that, it really helped us focus on what we needed to build in order to scale.
Focus, that's one of my favorite words. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't have it.
I think, honestly, it's harder even now than it had been. Because, and I love AI. It's a fantastic tool. And I will say, like, when Dave and I were starting out, for us, Google was our age equalizer, because, we didn't know how to do anything. We just Googling lots of things, like, how do you buy a domain name? How do you find developers? And that's how kind of it went into, how we would build the company. Now any founder, you can vibe code things. My 6-year-old actually started vibe coding his first game with my help, because I know how to read better. But so it's so easy to kind of get that MVP out. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's too easy, because I think execution, if you can get it out fast, then that's great. But you can't think at the speed of AI. You can't direct strategy at that speed. You need to have that space. I like to call I call it drawer space, coming from being an author. That's literally when you take your manuscript, you stick it in a drawer and you say, okay, going to give it a month, and then I'll return to it for revisions. And if you kind of do the same with your company, it doesn't have to be a month, but it's so easy to do things fast, or to think, oh, I need to do things super fast. But you need clarity first, because you can build something super fast in the completely wrong direction. And you're almost in a worse spot than if you had, slowed it down from the beginning.
Yeah, that's great. I love that insight. Thank you for that. Most companies like yours have some near-death experiences. I'm wondering if you folks had any near-death experiences as you grew your company and prepared it for the multiple times that you sold it. And if so, can you share some of those stories or one of those stories with me?
Yeah, so we have a few. So one of the early on ones, and so it's kind of, I'm not sure if it's a full near death, but certainly would have been a different trajectory. So we raised our Series B as a $12.8 million round in July of 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was a few months later, who knows what could have happened?
Yeah.
Especially because early on, so the partners that we ended up working with, that was Norris Venture Partners with participation from USVP and First Round Capital, which is our Series A. But when we were first approaching the Series B, we were so close to a term sheet with Lehman Ventures. Like we thought it was basically, it was going to happen. And then all of a sudden they, it was a lot of confusion, and all of a sudden they walked away, and we're like, now we have no idea if it had anything to do with the upcoming financial crisis. But it was kind of like, okay, it was incredibly lucky, obviously, that when our deal happened, a few months before, because who knows, you never know. Now, of course, it's still not a great experience for your Series B partners to come onto basically get in at what's considered like the height of the market. That's another relationship to manage. But it was, very good, obviously, that we were able to get that in ahead of time. Now, it would have been near death. I don't know. We were doing well. We had been always, because of our location, again, New Hope, love New Hope. We had always been focused on how do we, drive revenue? How do we grow profitability? And honestly, that wasn't the mood at the time. The mood at the time was, just keep spending money and hope you got something. Right. We didn't have easy access to capital because of our location. I think that's a little different now, but we were very much focused on, we can't count on the next round. But that we got the next round was important to our growth. Yeah. So another near-death experience, though, was as we're building, you have to maintain great relationships with the people on your board. Because, you have some large companies that have incredibly friendly boards. It's not that we had an unfriendly board, but it wasn't like where everyone on your board is your lifelong best friend or something like you see at other companies where you have to manage those relationships. And I've always liked how my brother, who reads a lot of Rilke, has described it as you have to fight rationally. And so what that really means is you have to always bring, you have to leave your emotion at the door. And so you can argue with someone, and this is true with your co-founders, it's true with basically anyone in your company. Like, you can argue, you can disagree, but you know that you're going to be in this relationship for a while. And you need to act like that. You need to always fight fair. You need to do the things that you said that you were going to do. You need to be trustworthy. You need to have integrity. And all of those factors, help you maintain those relationships so that you can get to the point where you can have that $100 million, $500 million exit. Because if you don't have those good relationships with others in your industry, then your reputation is everything. And it doesn't really matter how big you think your industry is. The world is small and your actions leave a wake. And so I think that being able to get to all of the points we did in our journey was because we did have such strong relationships within our space. Now, another near-death experience that just occurred to me too was we actually almost had a different acquisition prior to the $500 million round, maybe a year or two before it. And it was looking like it was going to happen. But then a decision by CFIUS, the government, or CFIUS is part of the government, basically blocked a grinder deal that was similar, but not exactly. But it made it clear that there was absolutely no way the acquisition was going to happen, and there was nothing you could do about it. This is like, oh, okay, well, all the work we just put into that, months and months of work, that doesn't matter anymore. CFIUS says it can't happen to this to Grinder. It's not going to happen for us. And so I know that's obviously demoralizing. It's not a death knell in any sense of the imagination, but it's very demoralizing. And at the time, we were dealing with activist investors. We were dealing with short sellers that were running smear campaigns, and those were so hard just to deal with. Because you have people that are just posting awful things about either you personally or the company, and more so the shorts than the activists. But all of those things are a distraction and can take over if you let them. And so we would have to just focus on, like, how do you block and tackle? How do you work on what's best for the users? And, be prepared to defend on these other situations, but at the same time, keep moving the company forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that attitude of putting your head down and just getting the work done is an important one. And it is difficult. It is difficult. Even if you know the things that are being said about you are not true, and particularly at a young age, you have to somehow find that tough skin, that thick skin to keep moving on.
Yeah. And the way I like to, I like to think about, within any decision you have to make, you have to find the perspective there. And a lot of decisions that you face as a founder don't matter 6 months from the time. Like, so much stuff doesn't actually matter, but it feels like life or death when you're in the middle of that decision. And so being able to say, you know what, this really realizing, so no, I have to change my perspective. This isn't a life or death thing. This doesn't affect the health of my family. This doesn't affect my health. If this doesn't work, it just doesn't work, and you figure out something else. And I think, I was at the company for 18 years, and the only way we survived for 18 years is because we were constantly pivoting, we're constantly adapting, we're constantly changing and figuring out, okay, let's find the next path. Because if you allow every decision to feel like it's going to be like, and even if it's a good decision, like right. you might put all your eggs in the basket, like, oh my goodness, I got, say, this interview in this magazine, and now it's going to explode. And that's probably not going to happen. It's still going to be like, even the things that you think might be game changing aren't going to be game changing in the way that you want them to. And so it's still finding ways to say, okay, let's keep pushing forward. And I think that determination is really what allowed us to, keep growing over, time when our main competitor changed every few years, because for the most part, the main competitor was no longer a main competitor after about a few years. And we had to, we might not have ever been the biggest in the space or like the gorilla, but we persisted.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk just for a second about leadership, because you started at a very young age on this journey. All leaders of companies have to evolve their leadership as the company evolves and the needs of the business evolve. And I'm wondering how the combination of being pretty young and maybe not even understanding your leadership style at the beginning or even thinking about it, how did you grow as a leader and evolve as a leader? What are the lessons you learned through that arc to when you exited the business?
So, and I think my age definitely played a factor in just the openness to that. I think something that it's important that all leaders do is they have the humility to ask for help and to realize that they don't have all the answers and that they do need the support of others around them, the support of their team. And because of my age, I wouldn't say I have no problem asking for help, but, I had to learn that I needed to do it very early on. And I remember even my first semester at Georgetown, where I went to undergrad, I was actually at the time kind of keeping myYearbook as this almost secret double life, because I unfortunately did have some negative experiences in high school with my peers. And so I thought going into college, it's like, let's maybe keep that separate. Let's keep my student life separate from who I am as an entrepreneur. And that quickly became obvious. Oh, that you can't do that. Because in my very first class, it was an international business class. And it was one of those super serious professors where they call everyone by their, so I was Ms. Cook, my maiden name. And as he was, going over the syllabus, I realized, I have a major conflict, since he was making this big deal. He's like, you cannot make up the midterm or the final. If you need to if you can't be there for whatever reason, then you should drop the class now. And, timidly go up to him after class. I'm like, I'm sorry, Professor Moore, I'm scheduled to do a talk in South Korea at the World Knowledge Forum that day. And I asked, would it be possible to take the midterm early? Because I thought, okay, if you take it early, then that's showing willingness to, you're not just trying to put it off. And, I was really nervous, like, how will this be perceived? And, he was absolutely delighted. He was so excited for me. He was like, oh yeah, of course, you take the midterm whenever you want, basically. But it just made it so clear that when you open up to peers and, for me, and professors, that Georgetown became enormously supportive. And so I took that with me through the rest of my career, where I'm like, okay, when I'm having challenges, you can't keep those to yourself as a leader. You need to share, like, this is what's going on, and be able to, ask for help, ask other companies that have done something similar, be like, oh, well, what was something that you wish you knew? And, have kind of those, Paul Millard, author of The Pathless Path, calls that path expert conversations. You talk to someone that's just a few years ahead of you in the journey, and it can really help you figure out how to navigate it. Because what research shows us is that we're incredibly poor at predicting our own happiness or how things will go just by imagining the future. Like, it doesn't matter how good your models are. We're just bad at it. We're not going to make the right assumptions. But we're very good at talking to others and learning from others and figuring out, well, they said from their experience that this happened. That's the more likely scenario for me as well. And so you realize that it's not going to help you make, the best, it's not going to necessarily make the decision for you, but it's going to help you make much more grounded predictions that will hone in your ability as a leader to lead, because you're not just assuming you know all the answers. You know that you have to turn to others and bring people along on the journey.
Yeah, great. Let's turn and talk a little bit about you personally now, just for a few minutes. Tell me about where and how you were raised and what your parents did when you were growing up.
Yeah. So I was born in born in South, so this just sounds weird. All right, so let's start over.
Okay, we'll start over again.
I'm from Central Jersey, and my parents are actually both engineers. My dad did something with tariffs. I'm still not exactly sure exactly what. My mom is an electrical engineer, though. And growing up, I will say that my mom always was like, definitely, she was always both my parents were supportive of the whole of being an entrepreneur, but my mom was especially like, don't ever work for someone else. Like, just do your own thing. But I think especially having my mom being, an electrical engineer was important because, she would tell me she was the only woman in most of her classes. Like, that's just how it was. And she didn't, stumble into engineering early. She had Jeff first. She had him at, she got married at 19, had him at like 23, and then went back to college after, having a few, different jobs. And, she was always very smart and always was like, okay, well, now I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to become an engineer, and, knew what she wanted to do and wasn't slowed down at all by how, like I said, all of her classes were not only men, but men without families and without all these other responsibilities that, she had as a young mom. And, I think that just having that example matters a lot because, tech is incredibly male dominated. I think back, I won some, I was a finalist in a major student entrepreneur competition when I was in college. And as one of the top finalists, I take the stage to announce the names, they're giving the awards. And the awards included a man's watch and a bottle of cologne. It's like 2010. It wasn't 1950, it was 2010. And so, but that kind of shows just how male dominated that industry is. And I think that that's also what made me so crave the support and company of women so much. And I think that that's something that when you think about mentorship, when you think about people who you can open up to, having other, I went to Wharton for, I did my executive MBA there. And so I'm so blessed and privileged to be surrounded by so many amazing women. And of course, it's not just, of course, the women from that program, but all of the women that I found that I've worked with professionally have been so amazingly supportive. And I think that is kind of part of the magic that, makes it work, especially in a male dominated space, because you need to have the people that are, a bit more like you, that have had some of those similar experiences, because those experiences can hurt. I was 21 getting objectified by Yahoo message board, disgusting Yahoo message board people. There's bad experiences. But having, women I could turn to helped so much, and it helped me so much to navigate that path.
Yeah. So life as an entrepreneur is chaos, and particularly when you add in family and other things that you do. Are there any life hacks or any daily rituals that you've developed to help you stay on track and be successful?
So, it's funny. So I am a huge runner. So that's one of my daily rituals. I need to exercise. I've worked lifting in too, because my doctor said that I need to apparently have muscle. I don't know. So I do both. But, so that's an important ritual. But something that I've really learned over the last, it doesn't really matter what the ritual is. It can make changes. So I'll give this kind of a weird example. But I started washing my face. That's weird because probably should have started that in I don't know, middle school or whatever. But it was not something I did in before bed or whatever. And I was like, no, I want to start washing my face. And then I was like, okay. But what was the shocking thing was about 2 weeks after I started this new ritual of actually washing my face, which again, it's a little embarrassing to admit, I was now a face washer. And face washers, they eat better too. And they exercise more and they procrastinate less. And so you start to see how there can be little identity shifts. It doesn't really matter what the habit is. I'm a huge believer in BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, great book, but it shifts your identity too. So even just taking that one little thing, you can find your motivation to kind of have that chain of habits that connects to it. And so whenever I'm kind of in a rut or I feel like, something's not going right, leaning back on one of those, okay, well, what's something small I can change? Because it doesn't have to be directly related to whatever the habit is. Washing my face has nothing to do with my productivity. It just doesn't. Right. But it does, because when I follow through on something little, it makes me realize, I can follow through on the other things too. Yeah. And I think that kind of taking that, it's a hack in the way that it's okay, these small things can have huge changes. And so sometimes you see these people and they're touting, they're you wake up at 5 a.m. and you take a cold shower and you do all these things. And you might be hearing them be well, I can't do any of those things. Or, you know what? Actually, my kids also wake up at 5 a.m. Yeah. Yeah. But you find the thing that, it's such a small thing, but find something that you can take that as a win. And then then you can find another win, and those wins will stack. And so that's something I've kind of always done throughout my career, is just finding the little thing you can do. Yeah. But then I also mentioned, running for me and exercise in general, movement. I find it meditative. It helps clear my head. I think it's such an important hack of just being able to think clearly and get that stress out.
Yeah. And how do you stay current and relevant in your field? What are the sources of information for you that keep you on top of your game?
So one of my favorite newsletters, I like Lenny's newsletter. That's just a great source of just, I like staying close to the product world, seeing what's out there, but really just exposing myself to, different podcasts, different people's stories. I think that that's what you need to be doing. And sometimes that can also be kind of the switch that flips and is no, I've been focusing on too much of my own stuff right now. I need to turn out and say, okay, let me get some outside perspectives. Let me read some more. Let me get those other things in. And that allows you to, make connections and find that clarity that you might need in your own job just from listening to other people's stories and from reading what other things work. Even in our early days, and it wasn't that early, but one of our features that ended up doing well on a monetization perspective was it was like a spotlight feature. And the idea for that feature actually came from Zillow, which, was not in the social dating space. But we were like, oh, that works for real estate. Could that work for people? And so I think always being willing to turn, your attention to other industries and other geographies. Because our main feature that led to our $500 million exit was a live streaming feature that we were introduced to from seeing how live streaming worked in East Asian apps and saying, oh, there's nothing like this in the West. Can we adapt this and make it something that could work in the US? And the answer was yes. But I think, finding basically what the industry beats are, but, don't get too, I think you have to be careful not to get too, pigeonholed in your own industry, because innovation and those really creative ideas are going to come from exposing yourself to all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the more you have your head above the waterline and you're looking at, left, right, and center, the more innovative you're able to be. So let's circle back again quickly before we close to talk about the last leg of your journey and your exit, your $100 million exit. Tell me about your experience with that exit, preparing for it, going through the process. What was it like for you?
It was stressful. It's one of those things where it's definitely like, because it's your baby. And, when you're having this and not only is it your baby, but I was also on maternity leave for the bulk of the, due process and stuff. I recently had my son. I remember actually the first meeting, in the States where the, our acquirers for the parent company, the Harmony, they're, coming in from Germany. And they're asked, we're going through the, basically the last steps of this deal. And I mentioned in my introduction, it's like, and I had a baby about 3 months ago or something, just to be like, oh, by the way, I'm on maternity leave right now. And I remember they were like all shocked because, they all have, German maternity leaves over there. But it was, so, it was stressful from that standpoint, but it's more of just like, there's the, should I not? Like, is there going to be something different? Is there what's going to happen? You never really know. You can only make your decision based on what you know at the time. What is your thing? So what we knew at the time, did change. So changed significantly shortly after signing. So right as the, we announced our deal. And then, it's March 2020, and then the world basically shut down. And it's not knowing like, oh, well, is this still a good deal? Is it still not, what was the answer? And I think that, because we would be asked, oh, well, live stream is your thing. Could you have sold for more? Could that have been, something different? But, you make, we don't speculate. Instead we choose to feel lucky because, at the time of the deal, the price was 30 to 43% premium to our average price, and the highest valuation that we had seen in years. And so, could we have gotten more? Maybe. But could we have gotten less? Definitely, maybe. Yes. And that's the thing about looking back. You can spin a million versions of how things could have played out. But, we weren't making that decision in hindsight. We were making it with the best information available. And that's all you can ever do when making big decisions. And I think, that was a decision that the outcome was great. And, we were very happy with it. But at the same time, like, it is like the decision was like, oh, well, you never know, but you can choose to feel lucky. And so that's, and I think that we were lucky. But that is one of those things that's like, oh, well, if you continue to dwell on it, it's going to steal your joy. And so I think that, you make the deal, you keep moving, you keep building, and we did keep growing. And, we left about 3 years after the acquisition. And, I am so proud of what we built and, and the members that we changed their lives for. We had many people that met their spouse or through a live streaming feature completely, made $1 million in like 1 year. And you see like just the effect that we had on our customers and our members. And that makes the whole journey, just amazing.
Yeah, it's great to change people's lives.
Yeah. And yeah. And of course, it's like the journey of entrepreneur, there's high highs, low lows, and certainly more lows than highs. But when we would get an email with a testimonial or a wedding photo or a wedding invite or a baby announcement, all of those things, it would just change your entire day, because it's like you could be having an awful day from work. Things, a feature could not be working and you don't know why. But seeing those users that you brought together, that's why we were building. We wanted to connect people.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And so you have left the business, and what are you working on now?
So the first thing I did when I left the business, I wrote a book, Designing Success. And I am a professional speaker and coach. And so one of the things that I work on is I speak to organizations about how they can have their teams thrive, both personally and professionally, make better, more sound decisions, and improve their support system. So I really enjoy that work. And additionally, I write the newsletter Growing Up Startup, and I'm going to provide a link for the show notes with where listeners can get a free virtual copy of my book, Designing Success, and hopefully connect with me.
Good. That's great. That's great. So last question, what advice would you give other founders, other entrepreneurs, so that they can avoid maybe some of the potholes or zigs and zags that you and your team went through?
I think the best advice is just really to continue listening to the user, continue to follow what your North Star is for your specific business, and make decisions to execute against that. Because like I said, you can never necessarily control the outcome, but you can control the decisions and the inputs that go into it. And so that's where your focus needs to be.
Perfect. I love that. That's a great way to close out. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, you can learn more about me at my website, catherineconnelly.com.
CatherineConnelly.com. You want to spell that? Connelly could be spelled a lot of different names.
Yes, it's also the president of Ireland, and she spells it differently. So Catherine, Catherine, Connelly, Connelly.
Thanks. That's great. Everyone, we've been talking with Catherine Connelly, Catherine with a C, this morning about her journey, starting at age 15 to build a company to a $500 million exit. It's inspiring. And I think, to me, the lesson is attitude is a lot of what brings happiness in life and success in life. And you have a great attitude. So thanks so much for being on the show. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, sponsored by Newport, a unique national business advisory firm. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future episodes.